Hey, deserving listeners. I am here to talk with you today about geriatric clients is the technical term, or elderly people who come to us as mental health people. I have an email from patron Tyler. I also have an email from listener Samantha, who emailed all the way back in 2015 asking us to talk about this. But patron Tyler wrote, "Hello, Dr. Honda and crew. I was wondering if you would please consider making an episode on geriatric mental health and the challenges and commonalities within that specific client population. It is a population often ignored in mental health. I am currently a music therapy and psychotherapy intern at a hospital's complex continuing care and palliative care wards. Complex continuing care and palliative care wards. And something about the way the medical professionals address the mental health of the patients worries me greatly. During rounds, meetings, and other discussions regarding the patients, they rarely touch on mental health. And if they do, it is most often met with a simple referral to a psychiatrist and the prescription of an antidepressant. There seems to be an over-pathologizing of the mental health of the patients in the hospital. Considering the fact that these people are stuck in hospital rooms for years with awful debilitating diseases like Huntington's disease, multiple sclerosis, or late-stage terminal cancer, it would make complete sense for them to be exhibiting symptoms of depression. Antidepressants are given out like candy to anyone who presents as depressed, not by psychiatrists, but by nurses and doctors. And they don't properly assess the patients. They only take a few seconds to assess them. Anyway, before I go on rambling too much, I would like to conclude by saying that I love the podcast and the whole crew. Everyone brings something unique to the table, and I especially look forward to hearing the latest development in Berto's interesting career path." End of email. I thought, since I don't specialize in this so this is me talking, not patron Tyler. I thought that since I don't specialize in this population, I would ask my friend and colleague to come on the show to talk about it because it is her specialty. Welcome back to the podcast, Mitzi.
Thanks for having me
back. You came to at least one of our podcast parties at my old condo downtown.
Correct. One or two.
So you've been on the podcast before, kind of, but never as a full-on guest like this.
Correct. Never in the hot seat.
Yeah. So you were a student in the couple and family therapy program at Antioch University. And early on, before you even started working clinically, you came to me and said, "I really want to work with elderly patients. And I want my internship to absolutely be with geriatric people." You're laughing because my advice to you at the time was, great, I'm fully supportive of your wish for that. However, there might be a problem finding a site, one, and two, getting the kind of hours you need in order to graduate. And you and I went back and forth for a long time about that. And I always, said, if you want to take the risk, then go for it. I'm just worried about you. As long as you're willing to accept that risk, then great. You did accept the risk. You did work at an agency that specialized in geriatric clients population, correct?
In a roundabout manner.
Okay. But you did end up working with a lot of elderly patients.
I did. Yeah. In the long run.
Okay.
I did.
Or at least more than you would get at another internship site.
Correct.
And you did get your hours and you did graduate.
I have not graduated. I have 6 weeks.
Oh, you have 6 weeks.
So close.
But you're going to get all your hours soon.
Correct.
Okay. So premature congratulations to you on that one.
Thank you.
I don't know what you want to talk about in terms of where do you want to say where you're interning at?
Yes. So I ended up working, and I was lucky enough to find a geriatric mental health specialist who's also an LMFT and a supervisor.
Okay.
I kind of lucked out.
So you found a site that had an LMFT who has the license that you're being educated to get, mm-hmm. and who also specializes in geriatric patients.
Correct.
Which is, you're saying, a lucky thing because that sort of professional is not very common in our field.
Correct.
Yeah. So great. So you found that person at a site that actually attracts geriatric patients.
Correct. So it's part of Valley Cities, which is a community mental health agency it was smaller and now it's actually growing quite a bit.
Before we move forward, educate me. Are there PC terms like geriatric, older, elderly? Well, what's the terminology that is preferred? Or are they all okay?
They're all okay unless you called someone an old person or you're old.
You're an old person.
You don't really call an individual geriatric.
Yeah. You're a geriatric person.
Look at you staying active,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's older adults. If you're speaking about someone, you don't really speak to an older adult and say, wow, you're an older adult.
Yeah. I guess you wouldn't ever say that to any client, really. I mean, you wouldn't say, look at you with your your millennial self. You're such a millennial. Yeah, I mean, it can be received as a put down or a pigeonholing of some sort. But
right.
Let's get into patron Tyler's email here.
Okay.
He says that older adults are a population often ignored in mental health. Do you think that's true?
Yes.
Yeah.
I also work before this career. Currently I work for an assisted living facility in a memory care unit. It's all in one. And so in that instance, is mental health overlooked? Yes. My guess, because there's not a lot of research, which is a different part of this, is that there's comorbid issues. It kind of gets overlooked, the mental health part, because we're working on so many physical aspects of a human that's aging that it's just attributed to aging.
Comorbid meaning that they coincide. They are, so you could have depression along comorbid with dementia or Alzheimer's. Because
of research, you can't really pull them apart. We can't look at which one is which. Mm-hmm. And so I think the physical aspects get priority. Mm-hmm. And they're the easiest things to look at and to treat.
So what do you do when you work with people like that?
So at Valley Cities, as part of the older adult services team, it's a lot of supportive care. There's not going to be a lot of interventions. It depends on the person, of course, and what they're presenting with. If you can help with the transitions of any kind of aging, so losing mental abilities, losing physical abilities, losing people in your life, depression, anxiety, and all the other caveats there. You treat them as above, but you have to take all of their things into account. I mean, some of these people are taking 25 to 50 pills a day. So it's eliminating one thing at a time. The crazy idea that UTIs present as hallucinations and dementia. And so we always have to look at multiple things. And I think that's a part of the reason why there's not people jumping to be in this position, is that it's complicated.
So complicated.
Yeah.
Because if they're on 50 medications, like literally 50 medications?
Literally 50 pills a day.
Wow.
Yeah, vitamin. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. Even at a certain point, I ask my clients, how many pills do you take a day? And the average is between 25 and 50.
Right. Because say someone's on 50 medications and they are experiencing some mild depression and some blood pressure problems, it is hard to know if one of the medications is to blame. And if it is, then what are the consequences of taking, say the antidepressant is causing the blood pressure problem. You take them off the antidepressant, which may or may not alleviate the blood pressure problem, but then they become significantly depressed and suicidal, which is a safety issue there too. They stop eating or something. And I would just imagine that it's hard to know what to change in terms of their medical regimen. But you're the therapist and the family therapist.
Correct.
So tell us about what it's like to be helping these people as a marriage and family therapist.
So it's everything that I wanted it to be, right? Working a lot with families that are trying to help their loved ones as they're getting dementia and trying to be as autonomous as possible. You can only do what you can do. I mean, a lot of the families are super supportive of that situation. And the ones I'm seeing are the ones when they come in with their older adult. I also go to a facility for my internship. And so there I just see individuals that live in a kind of a state institutional facility. And that's a little bit different, right? Because you'd wish that the family members were there. And a lot of our conversations are about how their family members are absent in that. So then you're just working with people about their grief and loss about the situation they're in.
Work how? Like what would a session look like?
So again, really, it's really basic supportive therapy because of the situation. So we're working in people's rooms where other people are walking in and out of. It's not ideal for family therapy. But just helping people kind of process the situation they're in. So it could be, touching on existentialism if they have the mental capacity to kind of work through what they want to accomplish, what they want to say in the last quarter of their life. It depends on their age too, right? I mean, I have clients that have terminal illness at 60 or early onset Alzheimer's, and then I have clients that are 100. So that's why this conversation is so difficult to have even,
right.
How to answer these questions, because it's a range.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be talking about, if I was a child therapist, I would have teenagers and 20-year-olds. But these are so different. A 60-year-old that has a terminal illness, so ALS, I work with Parkinson's, early onset Alzheimer's, and then further, then I have 90-year-olds that are completely in great health, and we work on purpose. But they're not the same human. They were raised in different times. I have to treat them differently. They have different values, but I have to learn about their process. This is a whole different ball game. It's really individualized.
Okay. Yeah. Regarding purpose, what kinds of conversations do you have about that?
So purpose is just the love of my life, like for research. I think retirement age and after, if we get into that eventually, is that the suicide rate for 65 and above. The population is 12% of our population is 65 and above, but it's 18% of suicide because they complete suicide better than teenagers, right? It's better, not better, but they do it.
At a higher rate of actually completing the suicide.
Correct.
Because why? Lack of purpose?
Right. So a lot of the research is looking at this individualistic society here in America. What's the question that it's mostly men that are in that statistic. Women too, but mostly men.
Regarding suicide after 65?
Correct.
Interesting.
And it's the research is just showing that what do men say, what do you do for a living? And you really identify with your job. And so after you retire, what are you?
Right.
What do you do anymore? And so purpose is a big deal. The ones that find purpose and they have a little bit more of a community seem to be faring better.
Communities like what kind of communities?
So whether it's volunteering or hobbies or church or friends or having responsibility in your family. So
taking care of grandkids or...
And you'd think that would be the protective factor, right? This is the research and the guesses, is that the protective factor for women is that they've been helping. Grandmothers help raise the young ones, where the grandfathers aren't necessarily
called upon or feel confident because of their socialization.
Right.
Regarding that sort of thing. Interesting.
Yeah.
So purpose in life, community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. My parents, my mom listens to this podcast sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
She'll probably click on this one. I don't know if she listens to every single one. Hi, Mom. She and my dad, who have been married for 54 years now, they're both retired, and they find a lot of community at YMCA, especially my mom, who has started teaching aerobics classes at the age of 70 something. Wow. Well, I don't think she probably wants me telling people. They made a lot of friends at YMCA, and it gets them active, and they're both really healthy, and they eat healthy, and then on Facebook and online, they're also really involved with everybody and the family and all their grandkids and stuff, and so.
And you think that makes a difference?
I think so. I mean, I know that things aren't always easy, health wise and maybe purpose wise, but I know that from what they say, it's really something that they enjoy a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember my Japanese grandma, who just died last year at 101. She, in her 70s, which would have been 30 years ago, suffered from depression. And as a Japanese woman who was born in 1912 or something, or what would it be, 1915, she, wasn't brought up in a culture that really pushed psychotherapy services. So it wasn't the first thing that appeared that occurred to her, but her physician, her primary care physician, assessed her for various different things, including depression, and then suggested that she see a counselor. And because it was, a directive from her doctor, she went and really enjoyed it. She really liked talking to this guy, and she said it helped with her depression. And I can tell you, as her grandson, I didn't know what to do to help her with that. I was a mental health person when I found out, and just didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do, because if it's so awkward in families, to know what to say as a family member. Do you ask them about it? Is it prying? Especially when you have a proud Japanese woman, quiet Japanese woman. But the funny story about my grandma that I think I've talked about before on the podcast is my family, there's a lot of hugging going on. There's a lot of hugging and kissing and stuff. And she wanted, at the end of the session, she would talk for all this time, and she'd want to hug the therapist guy. And he said to her, well, I'm sorry, but I don't hug my patients, which is fine if that's what he wanted to do. Because recently there was a case in Spokane, because that's where she lived, in which a therapist had crossed the boundary and been sued or something with their patient. And so he said, I'm really sorry, but I don't hug my patients. And my grandma's telling the story, and she's like, oh, so after he told me about the improprieties of this other therapist, I understood why he couldn't hug me. Which is kind of a funny analogy, because she's this super elderly. I mean, I can say that she would have been in her 80s at the time, this small, frail Japanese woman, and that probably this quite young counselor. I'm pretty sure no one's going to think that there's going to be some kind of impropriety if she hugs him, So yeah. You were making a face that indicated that, come on, dude, just hug her. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, right?
Again, yeah, the same thing. I hug my clients,
the
ones that want to. I actually find the funniest one, it's not even funny, it's real, but they want to know very much about me, and they want to know my religion. Interesting. So that's my boundary. Yeah. I had to learn real quick.
Yeah, I can't imagine how that would be a good thing to disclose. There's so much political fallout from that, right?
And politics.
Yeah.
They're real interested in politics. They all read the paper every day still, most of them. And so you have to learn how to dance around that in the most appropriate therapeutic way.
Yeah. Hugging your clients is something that I find most therapists are paranoid about, particularly novice therapists, even though it's never told to them that they're not supposed to. Any ethics professor will say that hugging your clients is a complicated thing. It's not like you can say always hug your clients or never hug your clients. Yeah. There's considerations, but in general, it's fine. Mm-hmm. And there's absolutely nothing unethical. There's no ethical code that says thou shalt not hug your clients, not even close. And there's no law that says you can't hug your clients. So, and most hugs between therapists and clients are the kind of hugs that you would give your, brother-in-law or something. It's not long, caressing, full frontal, touching hugs. These are the kind of hugs that, it's a brief kind of grab, and maybe even there's some distance between you as you just sort of put your arms around each other, but, and it's not sexual. It couldn't ever be interpreted as sexual. Right. It provides warmth. And for some people, like my grandma, it's the customary way that you say goodbye upon talking intimately for an hour. Anyway, other things that I remember about my grandma regarding her depression was, I don't know if she suffered from purpose loss. I'm guessing she probably did, because she had a lot of purpose from her job. But another thing I remember her telling me in her 90s was that almost everyone had passed away that she knew. Her grandparents, her parents, her brother, her aunts and uncles, her cousins, even one of her kids.
Yeah.
My uncle had passed away. All of her friends, her minister at church, most of the people that she was in choir, everyone she knew had died. Especially if you make it to your 90s, right? It's like the chance that other people have reached that point along with you is pretty slim. I remember she was looking at this picture. It was this beautiful picture taken in Spokane of her and 9 of her friends. And she's naming all the names. She's telling me all the people. And she's like, actually, I'm the only one alive out of all these people.
Wow.
And, that's when it just struck me. I just thought, I can imagine. I know what it's like to look at a picture and say, oh, my grandma is in that picture. She passed away. But almost everyone else in the picture is still with us. I can't imagine looking at a picture and saying, I'm the only one out of all those people that is still on this planet. The compounding grief and the enormous loss of everyone that you grew up with and knew, I just can't imagine would just be crushing to people.
It is. And compound that with physical and mental losses and simple things like your home.
Right.
Even if you move in with your family and it's a good situation, some people lived in their home for 60 years.
Right.
They built everything up and now you're left with a box of things. And that loss it's deep.
Yeah.
And now you're looking at those last pictures and you're the only one left.
Right. The loss of your house, like you're saying, the loss of your neighborhood, loss of your job, the loss of the ability to drive a car, the loss of your purpose in life, the loss of your physical abilities. You can no longer go hiking the way you used to, or you can no longer go to the bathroom in the same way that you used to, or something. You can't sleep throughout the entire night.
Oh, yeah. Big complaint.
Really?
Huge.
Yeah. What do they say?
Probably number 1.
Really?
That's a big one.
Like, I can't sleep.
I can't sleep.
Yeah.
They're just so frustrated with that.
Yeah. It's such a misfortunate or just tragic thing that occurs to elderly people. It is the inability to sleep at night. It's empirically shown, right? That as you age, it's harder to stay asleep, and once you wake up, it's harder to fall back asleep. And the restfulness that you get out of sleep is not as robust as it was when you're younger. And as a 46-year-old person, I can tell you that I'm already experiencing that. When I was, up until I was 35, 40, when I went to, probably 35-ish, when I went to bed, I fell asleep pretty quickly, and I didn't wake up till my alarm went off. And my alarm, I'd fall asleep, and then my alarm would go up, and I'd wake up, and that would be it. Like I wouldn't have woken up. I wouldn't have nothing. Now there is no. I recently that happened to me. I fell asleep, woke up the next day when my alarm went off, and didn't wake up. And I was like, it's a miracle, And whereas the typical night, I'm getting up like 4 times a night. You know what I mean? Especially in the morning, right? As the last couple hours of the morning, it's like I'll wake up every 5 minutes or something. It seems, not all the time, but, and yeah, if trends continue, by the time I'm 80, God willing, I will, I'll fall asleep, and then 10 minutes later I'll be up, and so I just can. So are they constantly walking around sleep deprived? Is this why my grandma fell asleep while I was watching Star Wars in the theater in 1977?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what else can you tell us about, telling clinicians out there or people who aren't clinicians that will help them in terms of your experience?
So I'm going to link back even just what we were discussing, different medical things, different grief and loss things. I think this has been my current theory, is that it's the difference between sympathy and empathy. So we can all empathize with being a kid. So all these clinicians that are around me that are child-focused clinicians, everyone knows what it's like, how to have no power in a situation.
Right.
But we don't know what it's like to be older.
Yeah.
We don't know what it's like to have all that grief, all that loss. You were just kind of sharing like how surreal it is to look at that photo and know all your friends have passed on and you are still here.
Right. And
so when I watch people interact with older adults, which I do almost daily, that's the difference. When older adults respond to you, it's because you're being empathetic. If the people around me are sympathetic, I laugh because, some of them will tear you apart. When you're just saying, oh, poor you. Oh, it must suck to be old. They don't say that, but they mean it in something called elder speak, right? Which is like kind of baby talk to older people. But empathy is like, I'm with you. Like, this sucks. And they respond to me. And I watch others. The ones that they respond to are being empathetic because we're all temporary here, right? And if you can identify that in yourself and know that you're going to be there, if you're lucky, that's what brought me here. That's what brought me to older adults, is that they're safe. Children pull, the heartstrings, like working with kids, like it pulls on me too much. I joke that I don't like children, but I own one, but I actually love children. It's too much. But older adults, I feel, even if they're having a hard time, I can be there for them. And high five them. If you get to be 90 or even 70, like, rock on, you did it.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, when I was early in my career, due to my almost daily death angst and existential angst, I thought that professionally I could get two birds with one stone. I could earn my paycheck while at the same time trying to figure out the meaning of life by working with older adults. I actually looked into hospice and other places like that, palliative care places where I could be the staff therapist. It never ended up panning out. Do you get some of that satisfaction out of it? Like, I find that people who, no matter what age they are, really, people who are facing their mortality, even if they're not, terminal, but just people who are aware that our time here is limited, have certain wisdoms that I benefit from. It'll remind me of the really important things in life. If I'm worrying about, I got 5 errands I got to do today, poor me. And then they're like, yeah, I'm probably going to die in the next 3 months. And I'm just sort of wrapping up my affairs and trying to, figure out what I want to leave behind. It just sort of puts things in perspective, right? Do you ever benefit from that way?
Well, I think it depends, again, on the individual, because sometimes I can benefit. And then sometimes when they're fighting the death bit, and that I don't benefit from. It's just angsty. It's angsty for them. It's angsty for everyone. But
when
then,
they're fighting it,
when they are
denial, and they're not happy about it. Obviously, they're struggling greatly at the realization that their time here is really limited.
Right. And then you think about regret, right? And there's not enough hours in a day. So I try to mitigate my own regret with that. And I do learn something every day that you don't want to let things pass. You want to get shit done.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
If there's someone that you need to apologize to or reconnect with, do it now, because you might not have a chance to do it. Either you could pass away, obviously, or they could pass away.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a patient die in the time that you've been at the internship?
No, not as a therapist.
Not as a therapist.
I work in a nursing home, so I
experience that all the time.
Experience that all the time.
Okay. Is it different in that way as a therapist? Would it be a different experience if one of your clients passed away as opposed to one of the people that you work with because in the other capacity, What's your other capacity?
So I just work in dining. I chose that on purpose for the last 3 years, and I'm desperately writing a book about that experience, which is
So you set up dining, or
yeah, I serve food and clean, do all that stuff.
Okay.
And I did it against the better judgment of the general manager of that location because, I'm educated and they try to push me in a different direction. But I got to see families together. Oh. And when you get to see families, I had just started this program. One of our peers here was working. She started working with me. So both of us did it. And you get to like be a fly on the wall a little bit. And I got to watch families interact all the time, and priceless work. But it's also like the lowest low job in anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know why it is so frowned upon, because I think it's hilarious and fun, but not everyone would do that work.
That's funny.
But it is different because I work in their home.
Yeah.
Like as a therapist, there's boundaries.
Wait, as a non-therapist, what's your title? As a dining person, you work in their home?
Yeah, so that's their home. I come to work and they live there. Does that make sense?
But it's
like a nursing home. It's a home.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
It's a home. It's their house.
But it's not a residence. It is. Well, it's not like the house we're in right now.
No, not as freestanding home, like a single person home or whatever, single family home.
Right.
No, but it is their home.
Yeah, it's where they live.
It's their house. And so I come into work and I take away some of their boundaries, right? I don't allow them to do things, which is fascinating to watch people, psychologically deal with that, but not as a therapist. So instead I get to watch them psychologically and then treat them like a friend.
Right.
It's been a blurry line, to go between each one.
Yeah.
But then when they pass away, it's a different story.
What do you mean?
Because I get to treat them as a friend. I feel that hurt a lot more.
Right. I was wondering if that was true. I was like, at first you think, well, obviously a client, you'd be more heartbroken. But then I was like, well, actually, with our clients, we have a professional distance with, but when you're working at the other capacity, you might actually become much more of a family member at that point. So that's what you're saying.
It is. And I mean, I'm close to my clients. I care about them if they passed away, but it's in a different, it's a different world.
Right.
So it's, what's blurring the line is that I would actually like to be a family therapist in those situations. So I've had to figure out where my boundaries are.
Well, you can do a combination in the future. What are your plans after graduation, by the way?
I would like to create that position in those communities.
Yeah.
It's 50-50. I'm working on pitching that. And if they take
50-50
it or not.
that they'll accept?
Yeah.
In the company that you work at as a dining person?
Correct. I mean, I'm going to pitch them first. I don't care which one it is.
Yeah.
But it's necessary. The adult children that I want to work with that are going through this grief and loss with their parents. One was in tears yesterday when she found out what I want to do.
Why?
Because she wishes they had that the whole time.
Wow.
She thinks it's a shame and it's actually unethical that they don't.
So let me take some guesses here as to what you're talking about. So as it stands right now, we have these homes where older adults live, and there are various different staff members. You got your dining people, you got your managers, you got your custodial staff, maybe some nurses.
Nursing staff, care staff is what we call like
care staff.
CNAs,
okay.
Things like that.
And activity people, but you don't have a therapist.
No therapist.
Okay. You don't have someone who works at the facility. If someone at your facility needs mental health services, they would go to a practitioner off-site, or a off-site person might come and visit or something.
Correct.
But they're not like integrated into the community the way that you are as a dining person.
Correct.
And so you're pitching to this home to create a family therapy position so that all of your patients will be at this home, and you'll be an intimate member of that community and therefore better able to treat those people and the families.
Correct. And the staff.
And the staff, interesting. The staff too.
Systemically, right? And I think that's why family therapy is
set
indicated.
up for that. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that staff. I mean, they'd be technically collateral contacts in all likelihood, but you obviously could help the staff with the treatment plan that you have in mind and more believable or more trusted, I suppose, than some outsider coming in and telling them what to do.
Right. So just even psychoeducation for care staff about anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
The way that people respond to, especially early onset Alzheimer's, I think is going to be the biggest piece.
Yeah.
Because the anxiety. So once you know you're getting dementia and Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
the anxiety is through the roof, right?
Right,
Because they know they're losing something, but they don't know what.
Right.
And they just cause a lot of upheaval in a system.
Yeah.
And the way that you respond is either going to alleviate that or aggravate it.
The way the community and the system responds.
Correct.
So yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm surprised that these homes, I'm halfway surprised that they don't already have someone like this, but I'm also completely not surprised. And the way to fund this would either be to increase the cost of the service or to bill medical insurance, Medicaid, and other insurances.
So family therapy doesn't get Medicaid.
But individual therapy does, and you can bill a lot of individual sessions and or say that collateral contacts happen to be in the room. So you don't call it family therapy. You call because it's not lying. It's I'm treating this older adult, and their adult children happen to be in the room. It's not lying to say I was doing individual therapy with family members in the room. There's even a code for that. So, and again, that's legit. So you can do that, and that would be an income stream for your business that would pay for your position,
right,
or something,
and retention.
And what do you mean retention?
Retention of residents and retention of staff.
Oh, interesting. So you'll get older adult people who will say, I don't like this place and I'm out of here.
And family members
Right.
that are unhappy with all of it.
Interesting. And you would be there to be the whole care. It's quite a big job. I mean, you're going to be therapizing literally every single human being that walks in the door, which I've often thought is actually something that should be done more often in all sorts of environments, like at the university.
Right.
I would love it if we had a therapist to go to and mediate or just like understand and maybe help us communicate better sometimes.
Ironic.
Right. But it's just such a non thought of thing. Right. But yeah, that's great. You could even be a contracted person potentially, which would be at no cost to the facility.
That's the next. So the pitch is that I would be an employee there.
A salaried
and
person.
I would love them to take me up on that offer.
But a contracted person, you could potentially make even more money and have more autonomy.
Yeah.
Depending, of course.
Yeah.
My uncle just died recently. I went to his memorial last weekend. He died of early onset Alzheimer's. Wow. He almost like 10 years ago or something started showing signs, and he was in his 50s. We just went down to LA last weekend for his memorial. My mom gave a moving eulogy, which was really moving. And the thing that I heard from his story that I thought, well, if this, because it's genetic, your risk goes up if it runs in your family. And so I'm like, well, what if this happens to me in 10 years?
Yeah.
I would like to, I get anxious about a lot of things, but for some reason I don't get anticipatory anxiety about this. There's something about it that I wouldn't like it, obviously, to suffer from Alzheimer's, but what I decided to do was I'm going to have a full cognitive battery done by a psychologist, maybe a friend, that I can get a baseline. And then every 5 years, I'm going to do this to see, because I don't want to be unaware of it. Because the part of his story that I was like, oh my God, I don't want that to be me, was he was an architect and he was very successful. And his cognitive abilities started to get to the point where it was really affecting his job naturally. But he didn't quit. he didn't have I mean, from what I could tell, there was no plan in place around how to talk with him or how to evaluate or how to even have himself know. Because that's the thing about dementia. You might not know that you're forgetting things, you know? And he got fired from his job, which was devastating to him emotionally, which, you know, would be natural. But to me, I just thought, I do not want that to happen to me. And the thing is you won't know until it's too late, right? There's a risk there. And so I want to have particularly memory tests done and executive functioning tests, you know, all the different cognitive measures done so that if there is a dip, you know, then I can sort of increase the testing. Like, okay, I need to do this next year and see. And if there's a precipitous drop off, then I'll know that there's a chance that I'm heading into dementia. And then I'm going to immediately tell everyone, look, here's the plan. Because in 5 years, I might not even know who you are. So let's retire because let's get that out of the way. You know, there's no sense in me dragging everyone down with me. Do you know what I mean? Let's get me in the mindset of someone who needs people to remember for me. Let's not have me depend on remembering things. Let's have a hook where I put my keys. Let's maybe not even have me drive anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't want to be in a position where, you know, I'm suddenly being fired from my job and I don't know why. And I feel terrible about myself and I feel rejected and resentful that I was fired. You know, like I don't want that to happen.
It sounds like you want to control your losses.
I want to prepare. I want to prepare. It'd be like if I had some condition that I was slowly going paralyzed or something in my legs. I would be like, okay, well, in a year, I'm not going to be able to walk anymore. So we got to start getting me on a wheelchair and we got to start, you know, figuring out how am I going to get to the store if I can't walk? It's the same sort of thing. It's let's prepare for the inevitable future that will happen. It's just a matter of when. We just don't know what the time span is going to be.
You're getting prepared for what might happen. You would do that for anything. So if your parents had heart disease, you would start running more, things like that. And you're getting prepared. I don't know if you saw Still Alice
yeah.
movie. And it sounds like that piece, right? And you know, the floor, I love that piece where she said the floor fell out from under her. And I've had honor to be around a few people now that had early onset, you know, super career-driven individuals and way too young. I mean, one I actually I thought she worked there, right?
Yeah.
You know, and she wasn't. She was there and had a young child, you know, and it was like really crushing. But then you read some research, and I read a lot of Alzheimer's and dementia research, and the things that they're linking it to, you know, we're talking about the sports injuries, hitting your head a lot. I don't know if you were a boxer ever.
I wasn't a boxer, but I've had a lot of head injuries in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I played football, and I also, you know, just being a kid, you know, just fell off roofs and trees and.
Yeah, and I think you were my teacher when I came in with the stitches in my head. Yeah. And so I have a medical condition where sometimes I lose consciousness, and I have done it a couple times, and it's called major concussions, and I've had 2, and it's a major indicator for Alzheimer's.
Meaning that it raises your risk of developing Alzheimer's.
Yes, the most is actually that. And then I don't know if you've read the research, and I don't think you have because you're drinking Diet Coke. That's what it's linked to?
Yeah.
Just all the new stuff in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I am drinking Diet Coke. Yeah, so there are things that are associated with Alzheimer's.
And protective factors. I mean, there's a lot of things coming out for protective factors. Reading out loud, you know, doing simple math, things like that.
Right. But from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if your fate has Alzheimer's in the future, it's likely just a matter of time. You might be able to slow the course kind of, but it's something that's just going to get you.
As of today.
Yeah.
As of today,
Right.
we don't have any way to stop it.
Right.
Dementia, yes. So, you know, knowing the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's.
Right. Dementia meaning is a broader term.
You can have dementia and not have Alzheimer's.
Right.
So dementia is just memory decline in one way or another.
Right. Like with my grandma, for instance, when she was in her 80s, she didn't show any signs of it. But when she was in her 90s, as she went through the 90s, she showed more and more of memory issues. And by the time she was 99 or something, she didn't recognize some of my cousins.
Yeah.
Which is why I actually made for her this book. What, one of those photo books you order from like Kodak or something. I made a book for her that had everyone's face, and as a child and as an adult, so she could remember who everyone was. And she, whenever I'm always making these like photo books and like, Facebook like things and stuff. And like, no one cares. It's just, it's just for me. Everyone's just like, wow, that looks great, Kirk. And I spent like, like 3 months on it or something. But the one person on this planet that like 100 billion% appreciated these photo books was my grandma. I made her one for her birthday when I don't know, like 96, 97 or something. And I heard from my aunt and uncle that she looked at it at least once a day. Once a day, she'd pull out this photo book, and she would flip through it. And so I made her 2 more of them. And I spent a lot of time on those books, and so it felt good to have at least someone on this planet, appreciating it. And so I made one that had all the names in it so that she could remember. And because in her later 90s, she was not we'd have reunions or birthday parties or something, and I would feel bad because I would walk up to her and she'd say, "Oh, Kirk," and then my cousin would be right next to me, and she'd be like, "Who are you?" and I'd be like, "Oh no." So anyway.
It worked.
Well, kind of.
It worked for you.
Yeah, a little bit.
And that's reminiscence therapy, right? So making memory books. Oh,
okay.
It's part of yeah.
Oh, it's a thing. Reminiscence therapy. Okay. So I should have billed my grandma, is what you're saying.
You should have billed her,
yeah,
up the wazoo.
Yeah.
But I also want to make sure that we don't use ageism in a way that we like lump everyone together. Like at a certain age, you get dementia. Because one of my favorite humans right now in this world is over 100. And she has her shit together more than I do.
Yeah.
No, I mean, on it.
Yeah.
And no memory loss that I can tell.
Right.
So she seems to think like she has some decline. And if she does, I don't know what she did earlier because it's amazing.
Okay. So some people have the fortune of not, and I don't know the stats, but it's probably a lot. It's probably a fair percentage. But it's common for people past a certain age to start to experience some memory loss.
Sure. Yeah. But why? Loss of purpose? When they're like their brain is becoming or reduced plasticity, right?
Right. And so that's the research. And again, it's not my specialty, but the research that I've seen is, you use it or you lose it, right? So if you keep your brain going, then it helps to stave off the aging dementia process. Anything else? Working
with the families, really getting involved with the older adults in the community, trying to find a way to appreciate what's happening.
How do they do that? How do people do that?
So having conversations, reminiscence therapy is actually a lovely piece of it, asking about stories. So Alzheimer's, the memory goes backwards, right? So you lose the short-term memory first, your more recent memories. And I don't know where this comes from, so pardon me, whoever I'm stealing this from, but the idea that in Alzheimer's, if you don't know where your keys are, you just have memory loss. But if you don't know what keys do, like that's more of an indicator of having something more complicated going on. So family members just being involved, like the picture book. I mean, lovely, right? You want to try to get the stories and engage their mind and be part of it, because I'm really interested in anticipatory regret. The things that you can't look back when your older adults and your family like start passing away. We're really busy. This society is just so busy, and the baby boomers are looking like they're more apt to have therapy later in life.
Right. They're more culturally accustomed to it.
Yeah. And a million retire a month or something. I don't know exactly the stat, but it's a lot. And they're going to be able to be involved in that a little bit more. And they're taking care of their parents right now.
Yeah.
Asking them to just see what we can do to like engage people to have healthier lives in their older years instead of, kind of not watching it.
Right. So what I hear also in what you're saying is there's a huge market potentially of untapped business in terms of a lot of baby boomers who are going to be potentially interested in counseling, but might not know where to turn or might be turned away by certain kinds of clinicians who don't specialize in that, or they go to a counselor and the counselor doesn't seem to really get what it's like to be an older adult or something. And then they never go back. And so one of the things about not going to therapy for people that are middle-aged is time. You don't have time to go to therapy
Right.
sometimes. But if you're retired,
All the time in the
you
world.
got a shit ton of time. And so I'm just imagining myself, I'm retired at 85 and I'm like, I think I'll go to psychoanalysis and like go to therapy every day.
And life review.
And what?
Life review.
Yeah.
That's something to process with a therapist if you have the time and energy to do so.
Yeah.
Because all the bad shit comes up, all the good shit comes up, but it's a lot
Yeah.
when you're going through it all.
Yeah. In terms of another reminiscent therapy thing inadvertently that I did was with my grandma when she was in her mid 90s. I did a documentary about her. It's actually on YouTube that I posted. It's long. It's mainly for my family. It's not like supposed to be for the general public, but it's a couple hours, and I went into some good detail. I interviewed her over the span of a few months or something, and I scanned something like 50,000 of her photos, these old photos and stuff. Yeah, individually by hand, and named them all by hand. And made this documentary almost 20 years ago now. 10 years ago now. When things start I just figure everything's 20 years ago, but it's actually just 10 years ago. Yeah. So it always makes me feel good. So, no, that was actually 10 years ago. And so that, I guess, gave her an opportunity to talk about all these things. That's when we were looking at that picture and she said everyone had passed away. But for me, it was just eternally fascinating to hear, because think about it. She was born in 1915. She grew up during World War I. She grew up during the Depression. She lived in Washington this whole time. World War II, war with Japan, post-war, the 50s, Elvis, the Beatles, she lived through all those tiny little moments in history and all the presidents that she went through and all the just life experiences she went through herself. And there was just so many different stories she could tell. And she's kind of quiet in general. So doing the documentary really helped me to have an excuse to just interview her for hours and hours,
What a gift.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So I wonder if there's like interventions regarding that, like, because that's what I would want to do as a sort of amateur documentarian. If I had a older adult client, I'd be like, let's spend half an hour every time meeting where I put you on camera and you just tell me about this, and then I'll edit it together and post it, and you can tell me, you could share it with people, because I think everyone has a fascinating life, and the longer you've lived, the more fascinating stories you have, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Do you hear a lot of fascinating stories from your clients?
Oh my. I can't even. I literally can't say. And and wow. I walk out some days and I'm just like, amazing. And yeah, I actually have thought about that. Like, what kind of therapy, what kind of business would that look like?
Yeah.
Just doing life reviews with people on film and getting it down and processing at the same time. Just the gift of doing that for them, for their loved ones. Right. If they chose to share it.
Because for me, it was like, okay, my grandma's 91 or 92 or something, and I don't know how long she's going to be here. And once she's gone, all of the stories from her generation are gone.
Gone. To to get the children involved in that, kind of like the hook.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of the hardest moments I had after my mom passed away was I thought of something I wanted to ask her, and you can't,
Right.
and so, and my parents are both gone, deceased, and my grandparents. So, you think, oh crap. And I was pretty good. I was also the historian a little bit, sat with my grandma and asked all the questions. I didn't record it. It was way too long ago. But then, so I just decided in this conversation, like, this is a great business. So I'm going to hire you with all the extra time you have at night with not sleeping. You can edit all these films.
Oh, me?
Yeah. You have all this extra time because you're getting older and you're not sleeping at night.
Yeah.
Right?
Certainly. Well, Mitzi, this has been interesting.
Very.
I hope that this addresses some of Patron Tyler's questions. What Patron Tyler is basically talking, Patron Tyler's been on the podcast before, actually, as a music therapist. But what I can say overall is, do what you can to advocate. I know that you're not a post-grad yet, if I'm remembering right. Do what you can to advocate. What advice, how can someone who is in a hospital that seems to be dismissing older adults' mental health issues, what can he do, do you think?
So I had this issue. When I first started working in assisted living, and I think just keep learning, keep asking questions, unfortunately, I've seen things that I wish I didn't see, kind of the neglect of depression, which, voluntary not eating and drinking, and we allow it. And then hospice comes in, they get some attention and they get better. And then ultimately they'll pass away because they're voluntary not eating and drinking, which is a choice, but it's through depression. So it's kind of this gray area. I just, I kept my head up and I kept doing what I could do in those situations.
So, sorry, meaning that the individual is perhaps so depressed and demoralized that they're trying to commit suicide. They're trying to kill themselves through malnutrition.
Right. And they have so little control of anything else.
They're just like, so you go into the room, you're trying to feed them. They're like, no, I'm not gonna eat that.
Like, nope.
And they're trying to slowly die.
It is a real choice.
Yeah.
There's some great videos that some social workers actually in Seattle have done about voluntary not eating and drinking. It's a legitimate way to make a choice. But when you're depressed, that's questionable, right? And so...
Because the idea is that if we get that person active, get them to talk about their issues, get them connected, get them moving, that they won't be depressed, and then they'll have a purpose in their life, and they won't want to restrict and die. And so should we just let them downward spiral, so to speak, or should we try to address their well-being so that they have a reason to live? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So imagine doing that for a teenager.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something wrong here. That's part of the ageism. Like if a teenager was sitting there and saying, I'm not going to eat and drink, you wouldn't just be like, okay.
Right.
But for older adults, it's this strange thing. And there's no legal thing that I could find. I mean, I went to everyone. But
to me, it sounds like the problem is that the community isn't saying things like, well, this individual is choosing not to eat. Does it seem like they might be trying to slowly kill themselves?
Right.
It kind of appears that way because when I talk to them, they don't seem to have anything to look forward to, and their husband recently died, and so it seems like they might be choosing to leave this world. Well, should we perhaps try to talk with her, or maybe just let her vent, or get her some, get the community together to go into a room and like throw a party for her or something, just to see if she continues to choose not to eat, I suppose that's her choice. But shouldn't we be trying something to give her a reason to eat? Is that what you're saying?
It is. So there's a gray area, right? So older adults, the difference is if they're not under 18, we're trying to keep their autonomy. So they kind of blame it on autonomy. Like that's their choice.
Yeah, which is fine, which I actually agree with.
But if it wasn't based in depression,
well,
right?
Well, if someone, right. Well, right. So if an adult, a 25-year-old, I've had clients like this who were restricting, and according to the law and ethics, I can have that person involuntarily hospitalized and forced, they can force a tube down her throat and actually make her eat. So if it's a mental illness that is depression or anorexia that's causing a symptom that is motivating behavior that's going to in a very acute way manifest in them dying, then yeah, we will involuntarily take actions to help them to stay alive,
right?
To help to protect them from themselves. But with older adults, you're saying that they don't do that.
And so there could be other things, like they've signed DNR things and other legal documents.
Right.
And what is our job?
Right. I mean, so there's this other area which is voluntary euthanasia. I can't remember the term.
It's physician-assisted suicide.
Physician-assisted suicide. And how, depending on your morals or your belief system, for some people, they're making a very rational choice that they have 6 months to live in all likelihood, and it's just going to be utter pain and horribleness, and they would rather just go now. And so that is suicide. They might even be a little depressed because
they have to be approved for that.
Yeah.
So those two things aren't going hand in hand. Like this one doesn't have to be approved and they get to have control over it.
Well, right. But it's approved by non-assessment or something, right? It's like they know what's happening. The physicians know what's happening, but they're not.
Physician-assisted suicide?
Oh, no, the other one.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
So voluntary not eating
right.
and drinking.
They're just saying, well, it's sort of like physician-assisted suicide light or something. Right?
It is. So, but one has due diligence and one doesn't.
What do you mean?
So there's due diligence in physician-assisted suicide.
Yeah.
So they get it takes 6 weeks. You have to get approved by a doctor. They have to give you the pills. You have to go to some kind of assessment.
And this is in Washington, the states.
Washington, Oregon, I think Texas actually, or some weird thing like that I didn't expect. So,
okay.
yeah, and that's here, and I've been witness to that as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's different psychologically as well. It's a whole different.
Meaning you watched someone pass away.
No, I was just witness to that person. I wasn't in the room or anything. Family was there, but
wow.
Psychologically, the week before, that's a whole
God damn,
different.
I cannot imagine that. I mean,
yeah.
There's no easy answers to those kinds of situations, but I had to euthanize my cat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't, but the vet came to my house and injected my cat and killed my cat at my request because my cat was not well. In fact, looking back, I should have done it 48 hours earlier, but I couldn't, and so I just waited a long time. I mean, it's fine, but that was rough on me, man. Like and I wasn't even in the room. I was like, I had to leave the room. Like I couldn't, you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's a cat, which, I love my cats, but if it was my mom or my dad and I had to, I don't know, man, that would just be, there's something different in my mind, about someone passing away who say they just slowly, naturally, in quotes, pass away, like they're breathing, or I don't know.
Have you witnessed someone die that way? No,
I've only witnessed maybe 2 people pass away. It was a car wreck that happened on the way back from Apple Cup from Wazoo. That was gruesome.
Traumatic.
How many have you seen? Like a whole bunch of people?
No,
die?
mine are personal.
Oh, okay.
Mine are personal. My mother died from cancer, and we were there. And so that long, drawn out, really painful thing.
Yeah.
And then my dad died suddenly. So, it's different. It's different. So I work in assisted living, and so people die, sometimes weekly,
Yeah.
I get a lot of bad news, and some of them hit you differently. And I will say the physician assisted suicide one, still, that was years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, hit me differently. And
How so?
I'm an advocate. I support anyone's decision to do so.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why it rocked me.
Right.
But in a different way, I still hold it differently.
Yeah. Meaning more painful?
No, it's more disenfranchised almost. It just sits in this weird place. So she
What do you mean by disenfranchised?
I don't know if I grasp it. I don't know if I can actually understand it in a weird way.
Yeah.
Because she was different that day. I don't want to give away too much information on who it was, but
She was more alert or something, or more healthy?
yes. So once she changed her personality with me. Right. And so I didn't know exactly what was going on. It's not really my job or my business.
Medically, you didn't know?
Medically, she was in a lot of pain and everything else. But the week that she decided, her personality was like on fire. She was like, hey, what are you doing? We're going to do this. And she was walking. She wasn't walking. I didn't know her walking. She was in a wheelchair. She was like running down the hallways. And happy and like, I'm going to go to the store. What do you want me to buy? And I'm like, nothing. But like, what's happening? And then we heard that this is the plan and she was going to do this. And they had a huge party, her and her family. Lovely family, like cracking themselves up. They were like falling out of chairs that day, like laughing, like so funny. And then didn't go through with it. Oh. And so, then, that's a shock to the system because I had like prepared myself in a weird way. She's not my family. I wasn't attached in that way, but it's still shocking. Yeah. And then did go through with it a couple days later or a week later or something. And we weren't told about that date. So then I hear that next day and it was like, it was just a very strange place to sit where her personality changed and I wanted her to live because she was so lovely. Right. And I was like, was it just depression? But, she must have been approved that she had a terminal illness. I just don't know. So.
Well, and because it's a choice, right? It's a choice to leave this world that someone essentially does to themselves, as opposed to, well, that's nature. Their heart gave out, or nature called and they answered. And whereas this is it. It's a human generated intention to do something, and to me, I would imagine that would feel different.
So, if I was thinking about someone like my mom in the last very end stages, the last 10 days, she was on hospice for I think 10 days total. She was doing fine, and then 10 days, and she died. But it was like it was painful the last 10 days. Choosing then. And if she had chosen to do that, I would be like, oh, that makes sense. This other individual, like they were running around. And so to me, it was like a healthy person, even though she probably wasn't. She wasn't healthy, but it was the mindset of being healthy and then dying. Right. It's confusing. And I sit in it differently. And even though I know
it seems like and this is a larger issue in terms of understanding that the staff around a patient also suffer with the loss. Absolutely. And how it's just completely ignored. But it seems like a family therapist who was employed, such as the one you're trying to, the position you're trying to create, would notice, oh, Mitzi is, I think she's, I wonder how she's doing. Mitzi, how you doing with that, physician-assisted suicide? How are you feeling about it? Well, I'm feeling kind of conflicted about it. Well, tell me more. Well, I'm not quite it doesn't seem like it was needed because she seemed fine. I could see how, just let's process those feelings. And you know what? Let's get you a look at the medical file so that you can see it with permission from the family, which I'm sure they'd be fine with. Well, likely fine with. Yeah. Or at least the diagnosis or the physician can consult with you and say like, look, she had a terminal brain tumor that had not, that was aggressive, and we had already, whatever. And so like she had a maximum of 2 months. And although she looked fine, believe me, she, that might have helped on some level.
It is. And people in those settings really sit with a lot of ambiguity. And it might be one of the reasons why people aren't, jumping at doing all that work.
Right.
And working in those situations. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, it just makes me want to work in these environments more. And I'm learning, and I'm learning so much from you around this. And it's clear, I'm sure, to listeners, like my ignorance just about this whole topic, because it is something that I never talk about with anybody.
Wow.
Which is a strange thing to think about, right? Considering that it's 20% of the population or something that's above a certain age. And family and friends.
Right.
And, Right. And I think it's a function of our society's privilege of the young, of our society's denial of anything that sort of gets in our way, of our society's capitalistic nature, and older people are just a drain on the capitalistic system, so to speak, in the capitalistic ideology. They suffer a lot, and we tend to just want to look the other way from suffering. We have a culture of making fun of older people. It drives me crazy. I've become sensitive, actually, in the last, 5 years or something, to the way in which our culture... It's similar to the way I've become extremely sensitive to Asians being depicted in the media. If I see another fucking Asian with a made-up accent,
right,
it's going to drive me fucking up the wall. I know, tens of thousands of Asians, and I'll say less than 1% have an accent. You know, all the Asians I know, their grandparents were born in this country or in Canada and don't have a fucking accent. And so, are there Asians who are in America who have an accent? Yes.
Right.
But most don't. And
good point.
And, it'd be like if every time you saw a white person, they had a Russian accent. It's like, well, yeah, some white people in the United States have a Russian accent, but there are some who don't, Right. And so in the same way, whenever there's an older person in a commercial or a TV show or something, it's like they're tokenized as like out of touch, or they, their memory is gone, or they're, just one of the tropes of an older person. Or the classic is, old people in a nursing home, and they're very, rickety, and they can't move, and they're like, get off my lawn. And then you give them like ruby red bubble gum and now they're all jumping around and, having a big happy sort of, hip hop party of some sort. Those kinds of tropes. And I've become sensitive to those, where I'm just like, older people are just you in the future. They're human beings. They're not some kind of caricature of an old person, or the same way that Asian people are here. I'm Asian, you know what I mean? And I don't have a fucking accent, and neither did my grandma. And so it's like, Asians are not your token foreigner. You know what I mean? It's like whenever you need a foreigner, you get an Asian person. And it's like, foreigners come from all over the place. Anyway.
So I think we need a big marketing push on both of those. Yeah. Right?
Because older Asians without accents.
Older Asians without accents that are not
full personalities.
Grumpy, right?
Yeah. Get on my lawn. I am speaking to you in perfect English.
Come here with cookies. Yeah. Because you know what I did? I actually was looking for old stories, like nursery rhymes or fairy tales with nice old women. I was trying to find one. And they're all like wicked stepmothers.
Interesting.
Or they're like magical, like the fairy godmothers.
Right.
And so I was doing this research, like trying to find one like mythical, nice old person, and I couldn't find any. And I was like, this is an old stereotype.
Or an older person who is the central character. Yeah. How many movies are about older people?
I'd like to recommend. I liked Quartet.
Okay.
And I liked Grandma.
Okay. Grandma.
With Lily Tomlin. And then Derek, if anyone gets a chance to watch Derek on Netflix.
Okay.
Ricky Gervais.
Okay.
Working in a home.
As I'm talking to you, what I'm realizing is what I benefit from is just hearing about the experiences that you've shared. All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining me, Mitzi.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to plug anything? Like maybe one day someone will hear this and they'll be like, how do I find her?
My name is Mitzi Weiland. I have some other things in the work under the term age loop.
Age loop.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me. Please take care of yourself out there because you all deserve it.